Welcome to What a Relief. I'm Dave Reilly. In this issue, I'm going to try to combine two of the activities that we've been showing you through the years, wood carving and wood turning. We're going to look at the methods and the techniques of carving on wood turnings. It's a very interesting way to decorate your turnings to make them a little bit different. I think you're going to enjoy it. Now I have here some samples of turnings that I have carved on. This is a very simple bowl. The outside has been worked, just tooled with a gouge, just to give a nice texture to the surface. Here's a walnut bowl in which we've done these radial grooves along the top. Just adds a little interest at the top. This one is a bit more elaborate with this wrapped twig feature. This one was done almost entirely with a knife. This is a very simple project, although it looks rather difficult to do. Here's another where the outside has been carved. Most of the decoration is done this way. Now you can be a lot more elaborate, such as this, where the leaves have been carved. In this case, I have stained the leaf area to separate it from the rest of the turning. This was done in mahogany. Now for this issue, we're going to do two projects. This simple little bowl with the carved, decorated trim on the inside, in this case, rather than the outside. And then one that's going to be a lot more elaborate, this bowl, this little vase with the carved leaves. So let's go to the lathe and we'll get started. I have here the turned blank for the carving. The first step that I went through was to turn the back, get the diameter and the curve that I wanted, and then I have, as a glued up block, a tenon turned, and this is to hold it in the chuck. Then it's ready to go in the chuck. Now we have it, we can lock it down, and now is the time to do the indexing. So we'll stop for a moment and look at the method of indexing on this lathe in particular. Most lathes, or at least many lathes, do have an arrangement for indexing. It is generally in the largest pulley on the system. 24 holes will be drilled. This gives you a lot of different combinations of 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, 24, whatever divisions you want. In this case, for this particular project, I found that dividing it into 24 worked the best. I want my carving to be radial, so I need some sort of a system to align it up and use as a reference and to draw my line. Now you can use the tool rest and have it in here, but I've made more versatile a little attachment here which I can adjust the height, and I can also adjust the angle if I want to have an angular layout. And it's simply a matter of laying it where I want to do my work. I can clamp this so that it stays permanent and just start making my lines. The first thing I want to do, though, is I have to define where it is that I do want to have my carving done. So what I want to do now is to define where I want my carving to start and my carving to stop. Also, remember, leave a little extra material here for carving, so your turning may be thin here, but it's going to be thick up in here. Now, as an aid in laying out my lines, I've made this little jig. It's adjustable in height for the different size lathes, and then the top here is adjustable for angles in case I want to do not have my carving on a radial. It's just pieces of plywood, a bolt, is simple and as low-tech as you can get. I haven't included any drawings for this because you'd want to make up something to suit your own particular needs. So it's just a matter here, I can align this up, and using a large clamp, I can just clamp it tight on the lathe, and then we can start our layout. I'm coming along down toward the end of it. I'm using a yellow pencil here against the dark wood. Sometimes it does help, although the dark is probably going to be as good as anything. But so now I've completed the indexing. Now you can see that I have all these 24 divisions here. When I do my carving, I'm actually going to carve 3 grooves, not just one. And I'm going to just estimate the distance in between. The turn carving is such a mechanically appearing device because it is so precise. And I like the randomness of a hand tooling. So I'm going to not, for myself, I'm not going to mark additional lines. But you can if you want. It is a very simple matter. You can go to your original starting point and then loosen your object, and after you have marked approximately the 1/3 position, and then just rotate your work that 1/3, and now you can continue and do your indexing, and now you will have your 1/3, reposition it again, and now you will have equally spaced marks all the way around. Now that I've completed the layout for my carving, I don't carve it in the lathe generally. You're in a very awkward position. You're trying to get into it. The lathe is in your way. So I've developed this fixture to hold my chuck with the work in it, which clamps in on the bench. I have included some drawings of this. There are no dimensions included because it's fairly obvious. It's all made from 2x4. This is a 3/8/16 bolt with a knob which allows you to change the angle. This is a 1'8" standard bolt, about 5 inches long, which fits the standard spindle nose of most small lathes. So now my chuck will fit directly onto it and I can do my carving. To use it, I just put it directly into the vise. Screw it onto the chuck, and then there I have it. And I can set it to any angle. I can change my position here. I can raise it and lower it. It's a very useful device for any type of carving work. What I suggest is to do a little bit of practice before you start. What I'm doing is just roughly marking the distance between my marks here, because I need to know how I'm going to space my other 2 cuts. The depth is very important. So my approach will be, my first cut is going to follow the line, right at the edge of the line. Now I'm doing this now to see how deep I want to go, and just kind of get my feel for the wood, my tools. And there's my 3 cuts, and now the next one at the mark, I will follow right along the edge of the mark, and now I know how deep it is to get the correct spacing. So now we can start our carving, starting at my first reference line and going down into my second line. Pick up our next one. I think it's very important when you do this to do it all at one sitting. Don't do part of it one day and then come back the next day. It's not going to be the same consistency as if you stay with it completely. Now you see I have my first 3. When I start again, I'm falling right at the edge of my layout line. This can be a little of a challenge at times because you're going to be going with the grain and then cross grain, because this was face grain work when we turned it. The hardest part of this is the boredom factor. Now there's to paraphrase an old expression, there's no tool like an old tool. This tool was given to me by my father in about 1945, 1946. It was my first carving tool. So it shows that if you have good tools and take care of them, they're going to last an awfully long time. In fact, this was an old Sears 5-tool set, and I've been using it ever since. Now, as I get a little bit further, I will just loosen up, turn my chuck a little bit to bring myself down into a comfortable position, and I will continue. It's a good time to put some music on and just go at it. Now the randomness of these cuts is what I think is important. It gives it a nice hand-worked texture. It breaks up the mechanical aspect of any turning. And by doing 3 cuts or 2 additional ones after your mark, it keeps you honest. If you were doing this completely freehand, you could easily get off. These would no longer be radial. You don't even need any tools. It'll be tight enough just by hand. As you do with all carving tools, you see I'm holding it in 3 points of contact. I have the tool, I have my thumb on the top of the tool, and I have a finger underneath the carving. So I'm well controlled, and I can just put all the power right into it with complete control. Now I'm getting into the areas where I'm going truly cross grain, and it's cutting much nicer. And we just go on and on until we come around to the other end and finish. Now we're just about done. This barely took 10 minutes to carve. It's not a long-term project, so there's probably no reason why you can't do it all in one sitting. And that completes it. Now we can go back to the lathe, do a little cleaning up, and this would be the time you would want to start and do your finishing. Now that's all that's left to do on the inside. It's just to touch up, remove some of my layout lines, and then it could be ready to be finished. Now you would do your finish of choice. The next step is to reverse it and do the base. What we're going to do now is to remount this in what is called a jam chuck. This is simply a piece of scrap material with a groove cut in it so that your work is a tight jam fit inside so that you can do the turning on the back side. The whole affair is mounted on a faceplate. So what I do frequently is when this has been removed or the base has been all taken off, you have nothing to grab to pull out. I just put a little piece of padding in here so that in the event I can't get it off, I have a hole drilled through here. I can poke it out from the other side. And that is how it's held in a jam chuck. The first item will be to remove this piece here. This can be done by turning or by sawing off. I prefer the sawing. Probably should be done by hand. This would be a tricky piece to do in a bandsaw. Now that I have the bowl pressed into the jam chuck, I have sawn off all that surplus tenon and the part that I was holding in the 4-jaw chuck. And now it's a matter of facing off the bottom and finishing that. Now, there's always a possibility that your part may jump out of the jam chuck. So what I do is, as a precaution, I use this little piece of, happens to be a piece of 3/4 inch, just hardwood dowel. Any piece of scrap will do. And bringing up my tailstock, I use it just as a little pressure pad, just lightly against it. Get it centered as much as you can. You can test that by just flipping it by hand. Not a lot of pressure. This is still fairly thin. Now I can go in and start and turn this area down until I get as far in as I can go. Then I can remove all of this and finish it off. There's no need to take very heavy cuts. Just work it off. Now I'm taking off the last little nibbin. Be very delicate because only the friction now is holding your bowl in, although there is pressure forcing it into the chuck. But any kind of a nasty catch could pop it loose. Now that I have it completed, it's a matter of getting it out of the chuck. Well, I can't get it out of the chuck because there's nothing to hold on to. But having had this problem in the past, I have a hole drilled all the way through my jam chuck. So now I can pop it loose with this rod. It's a good idea to plan ahead. That was the reason I have this little piece of padding in here, so that when I press it out, I don't damage the chuck. So it's completed. Just a matter of your finish now. Now this completes the carving on this turning. All remains now is putting on a finish of choice. Now in the next issue, we're going to work on a little more complex turning. This is going to be a leaf pattern. And we're going to discuss, there's not much indexing on this, but we're going to discuss using clay to build up a preliminary model for you to work from, and then the techniques of the actual carving.